Thank you so much for being here. If you like my work, please consider my book She Is One available on Amazon. Also check out my Patreon offerings where I'm creating much more. Blessings and love to you. Okay, so this audio is in response to a question that I received about the nature of MK Ultra and what it is, and why I speak of it often and what its impact has been from my perspective. I can tell you what I think it has been on the United States of America, but also on the world. I'm not going to speak too much to my personal experience in this one because that's something I'm working into and I'm going to do in a YouTube video soon. But for today, I can say that MK Ultra is not a conspiracy theory. It's that validated and known to be real. You can just look up Wikipedia and it has a whole list of well-sourced documents that you can refer to about what it is and where it comes from, to the extent that we know, because a lot of the documents and records have been destroyed by our government. But basically, it's a program that was started by the CIA in the 50s, and I tend to think that it was founded on information and techniques and technologies that were inherited from World War II and the Nazis. So when Nazi Germany was, quote, conquered by the United States, a lot of the techniques that they were using behind the scenes in their torture experiments, etc., became interpolated into the United States government. And in fact, even the people themselves, some of the actual Nazis came over to the U.S. and became, involved with the military and NASA and other branches of our government. And so there was this infusion of Nazi technology, if you will, and psychological warfare techniques that were sort of interpolated into the American military at that juncture. So in the 50s, in response to the Cold War, the American government, I guess it was the CIA itself, but it's really like a whole government program, started this thing called MK Ultra. Again, it's Googleable, it's a real thing, and it was designed to test various types of human experimentation and torture, psychological torture, in order to, extract certain outcomes from people. So to erase memories, to implant false memories, to make people speak under interrogation, to create altars that could be used for nefarious purposes, etc., etc. And this went on for like 25 years until they were caught, essentially, or it was called out and became known to the public. It was very, very, very widespread. It involved universities. It involved multiple pharmaceutical companies that are very well known, branches of the military, VA centers, public institutions like public mental facilities. And so it reached out to many, many areas of our population. And so like my family, for example, has been implicated on numerous levels by this, quote, technology. And what I feel that it is on the largest scale is the purposeful creation of trauma-based alters. And when I say alters, what I mean is purposefully creating soul fragmentation and dissociation within people so that they are no longer one unified person. They are now fragmented and have fragmented multiple selves. And then the selves can be walled off from one another so that one self doesn't know what the other self is doing. And there's obviously degrees to this. It goes, from minor things to very extreme things where people have 100 different personalities and none of them know each other. And then when they have set up this trauma-based dissociation, they can use the people for whatever end they want, whether it's just simply, harvesting life force by way of keeping the population numb and easy to control, so that they can extract, money, keep people impoverished, whether it's prostitution rings and sex slavery. There's a whole families that are in this in a way that has to do with sex trafficking and child trafficking, children that are born into it. So if you create alters, trauma-based alters at an early age in a child, then you can indoctrinate them into sex slavery in a way that they won't then go and speak about it to anyone else, because their core self probably won't even know that it's happening and won't remember. The memories won't be intact because they've created these alters. And then the alter selves that they do create will be in codependent trauma bonding with the abusers. So the child's selves will be loyal to the abusers, sometimes to the point of their own self-destruction, very often so. So this is used widely in our world, although it's said to have ended in the late 70s. The official MK Ultra program shut down in the 70s. And if you look, you can find information about how they've used all these different psychotropic drugs like LSD, et cetera, to create these altered states of consciousness, and it's all very known. But it, in my humble opinion, did not end there. It just kind of went underground, and it was also in the branches of military, in the institutions, in the medical profession, et cetera, to the degree that it couldn't just be shut down. So even if the CIA officially shut down the thing that had the file that said MK Ultra on it, the technologies and the techniques were so infiltrated into every branch of what we call our government or state or public institutions that there was no way to just like flip an off switch and have it shut down, even if they wanted to, which I don't think they did. So it continued, and it continues to this day in myriad forms that have expanded. And in my opinion, it's been expanded into things like advertising. It's been expanded into ways that people are manipulated to vote for specific candidates. It's children have been targeted through pharmaceuticals. The pop stars, the pop world, if you look at like the Britney Spears and the Lady Gagas of the world, are completely infiltrated with MK Ultra symbolism and techniques. And all of this is really designed, in my opinion, to create alter selves, to create fragmentation and dissociation among the population in a way that renders people much easier to use, because people can't be whole and present to themselves with this trauma-based dissociation still in place. And because it's the norm, in quotes, at least in the United States, I don't know how wide, worldwide this phenomenon is, but because it's the quote norm, it's almost invisible in our culture. So we think things are normal that are nowhere near normal, like body dysmorphia, like the greatly increased rate of mental illness, in quotes, in children, and the need to medicate children, all this stuff. The pharmaceuticals are actually used to encourage this fragmentation, and because it passes down along ancestral lineages, like if the mother has undergone some form of this programming, then her children will, without a question, be affected and probably immediately indoctrinated into the same type of programming. So it's really like a self-proliferating type of dynamic. So whether or not it's officially called MK Ultra at this point, or whether it has birthed many other malevolent children in its place, to me is not really like super important, because the mechanism of it is still very much happening in our society in a really unchecked way. And because of technology and the exponential growth of the internet and things like that, it's become even more, it's become easier and easier to disperse these practices of trauma-based dissociation. So creating the dissociation through trauma. And it's a core tactic of our government. It's a core tactic of our military. The man who abused me was Navy and Naval Intelligence, and I didn't know even until last year when I put the pieces together of my own story that I actually was in this program and didn't even know that I was. He was raised in military intelligence and was a Top Gun flight instructor and all these things. Now I've put all the pieces together, I realize that the dissociation that I experienced, where I had these classic alter selves, were based in MK Ultra programming that is completely known to have been created by our government. And another branch of this MK Ultra stuff has actually gone into the New Age. So for example, they created LSD, and they created a lot of the modern psychotropics that are used, and a lot of what's called, let's say, hippie culture or like free love culture actually comes from the CIA, because the CIA actually wanted to find a way to tap into the youth culture at that time, and they realized they were losing people to the regular, patriarchal structures, if you will. And so they decided to create something that looked like an opposition to that, but at the same time was still just a repackaging of the same dissociative trauma-based model. So a lot of what's, we think is hippie alternative culture is really CIA derived. A lot of what we think is, quote, spirituality. For example, the text, A Course in Miracles, is known to have been written by an MK Ultra research associate. And a lot of people go around quoting that book and think that it's like, they say that it's the consciousness of Christ, right? That it was a channeled experience, and this was Christ coming through, Christ consciousness speaking through the writer with the purest truth ever spoken. They make these grandiose claims, but when you dig deep, you find out the CIA wrote A Course in Miracles, which is one of the core fundamental texts that is used in the New Age, and a lot of people treat it like the Bible. There's other branches of the New Age that are similarly created by the CIA, and they have a lot of gaslighting and a lot of really malevolent terminology and mind control built into them, such as ideas like all is well, that which you resist persists, everything you see is a mirror of yourself. All of those things are gaslighting techniques that are used to get people confused so that they won't know if they're being abused or not, or so that they will tolerate abuse and even blame themselves rather than seeking to set a boundary and use proper discernment. So I will say a lot more about that as time goes on. Wikipedia is a decent place to start on this topic. I'm sure there's been lots of stuff written on MK Ultra specifically, and I haven't gone out of my way to learn that much about it from the very research-based end of it, because I wanted to stay in my own experience and let my experience be the teacher. So, but there is much more to say in terms of the research, and I know that some of you here are more expert than I am, so please feel free to chime in on this conversation. I think it's a big one because I think quite a few of us in this particular community who have come together are survivors of MK Ultra, so-called technology and techniques, which are used to designed to create dissociation. And since that's been such a huge part of my story, I think, a lot of us who have come here to this space share a similarity with regards to that. I hope that helps. I'm keeping it kind of objective and a little bit distance right now because this is a tender topic to my own heart, and I have to work my way into the inner circle of what I can share safely with regards to it. But the next thing I want to talk about is what can be done to come back into wholeness if so much of this trauma-based dissociation has been iterated in our world. What is the antidote? So that's where I'm going to go next with this. Okay, lovelies, I hope this is of service to you. I love you. Bye.